Traveling, working, and living full-time in my Class B van along with my dog, Willie Nelson. I'm Milo, and this is Milo Talks. I realize I take a while between podcasts. Sometimes these come easy, like the one with Riley and Jenna at college. It was spontaneous, it took very little editing, and I was able to put it up quickly. These last few have taken more time because I've been thoughtful in how I want to present this next topic. In many ways, it is a form of therapy for me, especially when I dive into more sensitive, heartfelt material. The Signs series got me thinking about how we're looking outside ourselves for confirmation and validation, something to point us in the right direction. All the while, there is usually a voice in our heads that has been shouting at us all along to pay attention, but often we let that voice be drowned out by other people, or even worse, the other voices in our own heads, and the battle rages on. I have had this battle, so much so that in 2019, I was diagnosed with depression, and it was recommended that I be placed on medication. I wanted a different solution. Yes, I was depressed. I had found myself on a hamster wheel of bad decisions, over and over, repeatedly putting myself in emotionally harmful situations. So rather than take pills and medication, I opted to go to therapy and also included acupuncture. And I started to really take care of myself, but also started to write down a dialogue of my inner battle and turned it into a script. I would like to share that script with you, thinking it might help someone else suffering the way I was. But to start, I want to give you stories from some of my friends who responded to requests to hear about their first red flag, basically telling me what the first indicator they had to say that they should have probably left a relationship early, but they chose to ignore that red flag and they stayed. Most of us have these stories, but I think it helps to know you are not alone. I'm starting with Jenny. She inspired these talks by going through another breakup. I'm proud of her. When we first met last year, she described the relationship that had gotten her to a mountain in a van alone with her dog Dakota. You can hear her story on season 2, episode 1, With or Without You. When she described the latest breakup, she paid attention to the red flags. No matter how small, she saw them waving. Here is our conversation.
And when you say looking at red flags or signs and accepting them or ignoring them, more than any of that, I just make excuses for them and come up with reasons why they're actually not a sign or a red flag. And then just carry on trying to make something work that's bound to not work. So the last relationship I just got out of, pretty early on, I had a concern. And I think a lot of the time when we use red flags, we're looking for something really bad. I've definitely dated guys with red flags, oh, I'm about to declare bankruptcy. And I'm like, that's fine. No problem. No big deal. So this last relationship, I guess you could call it a red flag, but not in the sense of as extreme as that example that I just gave. So in this last relationship, right off the bat, I'm very big into love languages and the 5 love languages. And those are the ways that you give and receive love. And everybody gives and receives love in different ways. And that's how you feel secure in a relationship when someone is speaking your love language. So this last guy that I dated, we had so much in common, from our lifestyle to our hobbies and everything. And he was a good, normal person. But our love languages were very different. And so my needs, for example, the love languages for me is I need physical touch and words of affirmation. And physical touch can be anything as far as putting your arm around somebody or sitting close to them or holding hands. And then words of affirmation being compliments. And he didn't speak those love languages. His way of giving love was quality time and spending time with somebody. So when I felt right off the bat, like, oh my goodness, maybe he doesn't like me because, like, you know, he doesn't sit next to me, and when we walk, he doesn't hold my hand. And in his mind, he's like, well, clearly she knows I like her because I've spent every minute of the last 4 weeks together with her. But our love language is different. So right off the bat, I was kind of worried because I could tell that we weren't aligned that way. And I have dated enough guys to know that that's important for me to be aligned in that. So I did let it have some time because that's not as like crazy as like, well, you have a gambling problem, whatever it is. And it's something that you can change or work on. But it just didn't align. And so eventually I got to the point where it was like, this isn't really what I'm looking for in a long-term romantic partnership. And so we parted ways, which the growth comes from me recognizing that there were things that weren't aligned, and being able to walk away from something, even though so much of it was good, it just isn't exactly what I'm looking for. But I think often when we think of those red flags, we're thinking of something a lot more serious or like tragic or terrible. But I think red flags can be even just something that doesn't align with what you're looking for.
Well, I think it's harder to walk away from what you walked away from. So it's interesting. And one of my other friends had mentioned, well, our backgrounds play into this too. Like if you come into a relationship and you're a bit shattered and you find another shattered person, you tend to make excuses for their own cracks, right? So those red flags, you're like, yeah, I'm used to this. This is my comfort zone in some ways, or I identify with this, or I'm going to heal this, or I'm going to whatever we do. But the ones that are the small ones like this one, where really nice person, you guys get along great. It's just not everything your needs aren't being met, and you were self-aware enough and kind enough to yourself and to him to be honest about it and end it early on. Now, I'm curious if you can say, because how old are you now?
I'm 31.
Okay, so let's go back 7 years ago. Let's say, or even more than that. So let's say you were 20. Well, yeah, let's say you were 21. Do you think if you had met this person when you were 21 that you would have had the fortitude or even the how you value yourself? Would you have ended the relationship, or would you have just stuck it out because of something else?
I could tell you for a fact, because I married the person that I was dating when I was 21, that I would stick it out, even though there were tremendous red flags, that was not going to work. And I only can see that now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I stuck it out and married the guy. And it took a long time to realize, like, wow, this was never going to work as long as I was going to honor that this isn't what I'm looking for.
So what's changed?
Well, I am a big advocate for not getting married young, because I needed to grow more, really. I needed to figure out who I was and what was important to me. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't wise enough to the world yet at 21 to go, this isn't what it's supposed to look like or feel like or what I'm looking for. So I wasn't myself yet. I was still growing a lot, and I'm still growing, but I hadn't really come into my confidence and knowing the things that I like and don't like. Therapy has played a huge role in my life in the last year, and giving myself the confidence and the self-awareness and knowing that it's okay to just stick up for what I want. So I would definitely attribute it to those two things.
Well, I recognized when we were talking, I was really proud of you. Let me just say that. I was proud of you that you ended it, even though there were so many great things about him, and it would have been easier to stay. And it would have been not fair for him or you. Now, while I have you on the phone, I thought I would share with you. So when I posted on my social media and asking people to share their red flag stories, I realized the first day I posted it, and I had some people reach out, but they weren't necessarily wanting to talk on the podcast about it. So I had someone write me a story. So I thought I'd read it to you. My friend writes, older guy, I was in college, a friend's boyfriend's roommate. This horribly toxic relationship endured on and off for 4 years. First hangout was at his place. We made funnel cake together and made out and whatever cute things 20-somethings do. Then there comes a banging on the door, like how the cops knock. He goes and checks it out and comes back frantic and is like, you gotta go. And he's literally pushing me out the back door. And I'm like, WTF, this guy owes someone money. He's involved in something. I don't even ask a question. Someone tells me I gotta run, I run. So I go out the back and sneak around the front corner, and there's a black Impala there. Shit, it's blocking me in. It's the cops. Looks like an undercover car. So I see like a 3-inch gap, and I back into it. And I look in the rearview mirror, and it's some blonde chick in a hoodie. Damn it. Turns out it was his ex. Her dad was a cop. So of course, I went on a second date. Second date, we went out to eat, caught a movie at a theater that sold buckets of beer. I don't drink beer, so naturally he bought an entire bucket. Throughout the movie, he drank all 8 beers and proceeded to pass out. The movie was over, and he's like really passed out, and the movie people are like, hey, you need to get your dude. I'm like, how? Am I supposed to physically drag him? I was mortified, and I fished his car key out of his pocket and left in his car since he drove us there. And then we dated for 4 years. I'm going to say this was because she was in college. I think we do this when we're young, and we almost can say, well, it's expected and excusable when we're, 18, 19, 20, 21. I got some real doozies in my message box that came in. I was like, wow.
Oh, I bet. I mean, I've got just stories. And as I was thinking about this too, and why, and thinking about like ones that have been easier to leave and harder to leave, but talking about like those red flags, like the big ones, like in that story that you just told, but also in my own stories, like the one about the guy who was about to declare bankruptcy. He was also a nomad, in a like little camper that couldn't be moved because it was going to fall apart. And then the other half of the year in a tent, working as a river guide and gambling on the internet. That one, I stayed way too long. And I think some of it is because he spoke my love languages so well that I just had hearts in my eyes and could forgive all of the bad things, which you've seen me do.
Yes, I have.
Where it's like, if I'm getting what I need in certain ways, then I can look past really bad red flags. And I wonder if some of that is just like, even going back to like, we do that in college because we get swept up in like the excitement of it. If that kind of is why we excuse those big red flags.
Maybe so. And I think there's a lot of pressure to be a couple. There's a lot of pressure in our society to be coupled up. So we want to not fail, not just ourselves, but, everyone around us. Like, why aren't you in a relationship? What are you broken? Like, what's wrong with you?
Well, I think, I also think some of it comes down to also how happy you can be alone. Because I think that was my problem for a long time, was that I always wanted somebody else around to help me be happy. And it's only been the last couple of years that I've become more comfortable just being by myself and knowing that like I don't really need a partner in that. Like, yeah, that would be great, but I'm not just going to like settle down with the first guy who checks a couple boxes just so that I can have somebody. And I think that's also where some of that pressure comes in for people who want to have kids, where it's like, okay, well, I better find someone quick because that biological clock is ticking. And yeah, that pressure to like, well, I just need somebody. So it's okay if they come with red flags or whatever they're going to come with.
Right. Right. Well, thank you again for joining me on my podcast. And well, I'm looking forward to what you inspire next.
Well, we just need to meet up again so we can have some of these great conversations.
Oh, I know. But I will see you soon. In the meantime, stay really safe and thank you.
Of course. You're welcome.
I had mentioned that I had posted on social media a request for some of these red flag stories. And I was really interested in the first red flag, that first one that we chose to ignore. So one of my friends wrote this in. She says, "My red flag moment that I ignored. So my ex-husband and I had only recently started dating, long distance, and we're meeting in Orlando to spend a few days together. I arrived before he did. He called me to tell me he'd gotten pulled over by a state trooper and given a ticket for speeding. I said, 'You're kidding.' And his reply was, 'No, I'm not fucking kidding.' This might not seem like a big deal, but keep in mind, we'd only known each other for a few weeks. There was unbelievable anger in his voice, and he chose to talk to me like that because he was angry at someone else. Over time, even after we married, this was a habit. He had this inability to calmly and rationally deal with stressful situations. The sky was always falling, so to speak, and I bore the brunt of his frustration as he vented that anger verbally in my direction. I learned in our years together that this was learned behavior. His father was similar, and his expectations was that I fix not only the situation, but also use my energies to talk him down. His inability to calm down and to learn how to self-soothe are one of the reasons I left. I'm curious, after listening to Jenny, how many of you listening would have stayed with this last guy that she just broke up with? Thinking, so what if he didn't hold her hand? There was a small voice inside me that thought that. But the truth is, she showed her own love for herself. The ability to say, I am worthy of more. Don't we all deserve to feel and think this way? Join me for part 2 when the voice in her head said, don't do it. But Roberta did not listen. How much time would you sacrifice on the wrong man? Note to self. Clearly, I am not alone in some of the decision or poor decisions I have made for myself. The important thing for me in all of this is that I recognize my own patterns, my own missteps, my own mistakes in not leaving soon enough or just accepting what I accepted for so long. My hope for myself, no. My knowing going forward is that I will never slip into these bad patterns again. Yeah, I like the sound of that. As always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for listening to Milo Talks. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Milo Talks or email me at milotalkstostrangers@gmail.com.